Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Kris. This is another video from Free History. I just did the George Rogers Clark. I don't have any pictures for this guy, and this guy is must be a bad signal area for my microphone. The Polish engineer of the American Revolution. Must be running out of Wi-Fi for my mic, so I'm not going to try to repeat the name again. I nailed it. Alright, let's get into the video.
He was a nobleman who freed his serfs, a child of the Enlightenment, a composer, a painter, a general of revolutions on both sides of the Atlantic, a hero of Saratoga and Rockawreach, and much more. He fought for his ideals at home and abroad his entire life, trying to make all men free. Today we look at the incredible life of Tadeusz Kościuszko. Welcome to America's Forgotten Founders, where we will look at people whose contributions to the American Revolution, whether on the battlefield, in the halls of power, or on the home front, have been all but forgotten by the annals of history. Tadeusz Kościuszko was born on either the 4th or 12th of February 1746 into a modest Polish noble family of Lithuanian Ruthenian origins on the estate Meritjoy near the small village of Kosau in what is now modern-day Belarus. He was the fourth and last child of Ludwik Tadeusz Kościuszko and his wife Tekla Ratomska. His father served as a colonel in the military of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Despite his ethnic origins, Tadeusz fully embraced the Polish language, culture, and customs throughout his life. He received his full name after his baptism, Andrzej Tadeuszko Bonaventura Kościuszko. We know little else about his childhood until he and his older brother Joseph began studying in 1755 at the Piarist College in Lubeszczo. After their father died and they ran out of money, the boys returned home in 1758. The boys spent the next few years managing their father's estate. Beginning in December 1765, he attended the Corps of Cadets School, graduating a year later in 1766. He remained at the school as an instructor, obtaining the rank of captain. When the Commonwealth erupted into civil war in 1768, Tadeusz, having friends, family, and benefactors on both sides, went into self-imposed exile in France in late 1769. As his homeland's woes will play a prominent role in his later life, we should briefly talk about the situation in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth at this time. The Commonwealth, once one of Europe's great powers, was being torn apart by Prussia and Austria to the west and Russia to the east. At home, the Poles were divided between resistance and cooperation with these powers, leading to several internal and external conflicts as the Polish state collapsed. Now, back to our story. Even though he couldn't officially enroll in French military academies because he was a foreigner, he nonetheless attended military lectures and read vociferously in the libraries of the Parisian military academies. At school, he developed his passion for painting and drawing, something he would continue to do throughout his life. At the same time, he began taking lessons in architecture from Jean-Rodolphe Perronnet, one of the best architects of the day. While in France, Tadeusz fell in with a crowd of young intellectuals that embraced the Enlightenment's ideals of liberty, individual freedom, and freedom of expression. These ideals, along with his Piarist education back in his homeland, would leave a lasting impression on Tadeusz and guide him for the rest of his life. After the first partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth by Russia, Austria, and Prussia, he briefly returned home in 1774, only to learn Joseph had squandered most of their family's wealth, his prospects limited, and to escape the vengeful retainers of a provincial governor with whose daughter he had an affair.
Ooh.
He first journeyed to the electorate of Saxony, trying and failing to join the Saxon military. He then traveled back to France, where he first learned about the American Revolution. Since the revolution seemed to embody many of the Enlightenment ideas he had come to hold dear, and with limited prospects in Europe, he sailed across the Atlantic in June 1776. When he and his fellow officers arrived in the U.S., Tadeusz immediately offered his services to the Second Continental Congress. One day later, on August 31st, 1776, he was commissioned a colonel in the Continental Army. Congress sent the young Polish engineer to Fort Ticonderoga in May 1777 to fortify the strategically important fort on the U.S.-Canadian border. Immediately after his arrival, Tadeusz recommended placing artillery on a ridge overlooking the fort to his superior, Brigadier General Arthur St. Clair. He argued that a colonial battery on the Sugar Loaf, as the rise was known, would deny the position to the British and offer mutual support fire to boost Ticonderoga's defense. Even though other engineers attached to the fort agreed with the young officer, General St. Clair refused. In June that year, a British force under the command of Lieutenant General John Burgoyne, just as Tadeusz expected, placed their artillery on the Sugar Loaf and besieged the fort. Under constant bombardment and unable to return fire, the Continental Army's position was untenable. They quickly abandoned the fort and withdrew, being pursued hard by Burgoyne's victorious army. At the insistence of Major General Philip Schuyler, the overall theater commander, Tadeusz bravely attempted to impede General John Burgoyne's plans to encircle the weary Continental forces during their retreat by felling trees in the road, damming streams, and destroying bridges. Burgoyne, his army weighed down by their baggage train and slowed by Tadeusz's obstacles, was eventually forced to give up that pursuit. The withdrawal completed, Major General Horatio Gates, appointed to replace Schuyler, ordered Tadeusz to scout ahead and choose the ground where they'd turn and make their stand against Burgoyne. Gates knew that Burgoyne would attempt to link up with Colonel Howe and General Clinton. He sought to prevent this by creating a line of impregnable defenses and force Burgoyne's overextended and exhausted army to surrender before relief arrived. Tadeusz chose the ground well, selecting a place known as Bemis Heights for the Continental Army's stand. This area offered an unobstructed field of fire on the only road to Albany, New York. Tadeusz knew Burgoyne's army was primarily road-bound because of their sprawling supply train. Furthermore, the terrain pinned Burgoyne's troops against the Hudson River on the low ground, while the Continentals held the high ground. The Continental Army spent a week fortifying the ground, digging trenches, erecting breastworks, and other fortifications designed by Tadeusz personally. Despite launching 2 major assaults, Burgoyne could not penetrate the breastworks in spite of heavy losses on both sides. After taking over 1,000 casualties, running low on supplies, and suffering the crushing realization that he couldn't be relieved in time, General Burgoyne surrendered the remainder of his army, over 6,000 men, to General Gates on October 17, 1777. The role Tadeusz played in this great battle cannot be overstated, as Gates himself wrote to his friend, Dr. Benjamin Rush, shortly after the battle. The great tacticians of this campaign were hills and forests, which a young Polish engineer was skillful enough to select for my encampment. For a man as fond of himself as Gates, such a compliment must have been well earned.
And probably hurt to say, because Gates would have rather have taken that compliment on his own.
Victory at Saratoga marked a significant turning point in the war. It convinced the French king, Louis XVI, who questioned the Continental Army's ability to win the war, to formally ally his nation with the rebels and militarily join the conflict. Shortly after the battle, Tadeusz also reportedly composed a song that would later become a rallying cry for Polish patriots during the November 1830 uprising against Russian domination. After the tremendous victory at Saratoga, Tadeusz was sent to West Point, New York, to fortify the American position at the behest of General George Washington. This task would take him 2 years. West Point was a tactically significant position on the S-curve of the Hudson River, around 50 miles north of New York. New York remained under British occupation until November 1783. Control of the Hudson River prevented the British Navy from dividing the colonies into two and deploying an army in their rear. After he finished his task in August 1780, Washington granted his transfer request to active duty, sending him to fight in the South. Arriving shortly after the disastrous defeat at the Battle of Camden.
Real fast, anyone who's watching, has any one of you ever heard of this man before? I haven't. I don't even know if I've ever heard of any reference to a Polish engineer. Which is very interesting.
Tadeusz again played a central role in helping a second American army escape destruction after a crushing defeat. Along the route, Tadeusz created camps for the troops to rest, scouted ahead for suitable river crossings, and fortified strong points to delay Lord Cornwallis's pursuit of the shattered army. He also built flat-bottomed, shallow draft boats to ferry the troops across the Yadkin and Dan rivers. Unable to cross the Dan, Cornwallis had to give up the pursuit, allowing the Continentals to live to fight another day. With another successful, perhaps war-saving withdrawal behind him, Tadeusz immediately began building the fortifications for the main encampment of the Southern Army at Halifax, Virginia. He also helped the Southern Army commander, Nathaniel Greene, choose the ground for the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. The British, while winning a tactical victory against a larger American force, suffered a strategic defeat. British losses were so high that Cornwallis's army was no longer an effective fighting force, and he chose to retire to a small, insignificant seaside village named Yorktown to await reinforcements. Later, in 1781, during the disastrous siege of the Star Fort, Tadeusz was bayoneted in the buttocks by a British soldier, the only wound he would suffer in the Revolution. After recovering from his wound, Tadeusz would engage in several smaller actions until the war's end. He would also, after the death of his friend, Colonel John Laurens, the lead intelligence officer for the Southern Army, manage the Army's intelligence gathering efforts. He fought his last action during the final battle of the war on November 14, 1782, the Battle of James Island, in which his small force was overwhelmed by a British contingent over 3 times their size. The men barely escaped. After finally receiving the back pay he was due, going unpaid throughout his service, he returned to his homeland, arriving on August 26, 1784. Tadeusz had much life left in him. When he returned to manage part of the family's estate, he limited his peasants' obligatory service to 2 days a week for men and none for women. His estate began losing money as a result. He joined the Army of the Kingdom of Poland to make ends meet. Not thrilled about serving a monarchy, he entered Commonwealth politics, being a driving force behind the adoption of a new constitution. When Russia invaded with an army of 100,000 men in response, he skillfully defeated Russian detachments at the Battle of Zelencha and Dubienka. Though heavily outnumbered, he credited his success to his experience in the American Revolution. For his incredible military success against...
I'm sorry, but it seems like he already had an innate ability going into the Revolutionary War. It might have expanded his ability to do things. He probably tried things, but I think he was probably already on solid ground for what his ability was. Not saying it didn't help, but I'm saying that I think that even if he was not, well, I take that back. If he didn't go to the Revolutionary War, he might have had tactics and ideas that he didn't get to try in a battle, to fail and things like that. So yeah, I could see that, but I think he had that mind to think of things that would have been probably a success.
Russia, the king sought to award him the Order of the White Eagle, one of the highest awards of the Commonwealth, but he refused the medal since it was awarded by the pleasure of the king.
Oh.
The king then shocked the Commonwealth by ordering his troops to cease hostilities against the Russian forces. The resulting second partition of Poland reduced Poland to a rump state. By this stage, Tadeusz had lost all faith in the monarchical system and went into self-imposed exile in Leipzig, Austria, where he became involved with like-minded exiles who were planning an uprising against what they saw as Russian occupation of their land. Even though he doubted the rebellion could succeed, Tadeusz, when asked to command, agreed. In March 1794, after the Tsarist secret police had learned about the rebellion plot and began arresting the Polish civilian and military leadership, he launched the Kosciusko uprising against Prussian and Russian domination of Poland. Though he gained an impressive victory at the Battle of Raklowice, as he predicted it would be a fruitless endeavor ultimately. Hopelessly outnumbered, his forces were defeated, and he was severely wounded before being taken prisoner. His uprising, while brave, ultimately resulted in the third partition of Poland, which effectively ended the existence of a sovereign Polish state for 123 years. After 2 years of imprisonment, he was pardoned by the new Tsar, Paul I, after he swore an oath of loyalty. Not wanting to remain in his shattered homeland, he worked his way once again to the United States, arriving in Philadelphia on August 18, 1797. During his visit, he befriended then Vice President Thomas Jefferson, who helped Tadeusz leave America under an assumed name with a fake passport to fight once again for Poland. The two men would continue corresponding until Tadeusz's death. In his will, he left his American estate to the slaves of Thomas Jefferson. After Jefferson's death, he wished for his estate to purchase the freedom of the former slaves and provide them an education. His wishes, though, were ultimately in vain, and none of the money was ever used for that purpose.
Oh, wow.
Trying to represent the interests of an independent Poland, he got nowhere with the French government headed by Napoleon or the Russian government headed by Tsar Alexander I. Resigning himself from public life, Tadeusz, on April 2, 1817, returned to his old family estate and completely emancipated his serfs. Angered by this decision, the Tsar reversed his emancipation and stripped him of his estate. A defeated and tired man, his health steadily declining, he left his homeland for the last time. This decline was exacerbated by a fall from a horse. While trying to recover, he died from a stroke at his home in Solothurn, Switzerland, on October 15, 1817, at the age of 71. His death was mourned across partitioned Poland, with church bells ringing throughout the land. Tadeusz Kościuszko was a man ahead of his time, not only in words, but in deeds. His wish to pay for the emancipation and education of American slaves, as well as his decision to free his serfs, placed him leagues above his contemporaries.
Yep.
While many founding fathers may have shared similar beliefs internally, Kosciuszko alone acted on them. His military legacy, especially in the United States, was long-lived. West Point, the post he had helped fortify, would, after becoming the first United States military academy, emphasize engineering above all else. It took until after the First World War for the academy to turn away from military engineering as the cornerstone of the cadets' education. Let's not forget, his brilliance saved the Continental Army from being wiped out not once but twice. Without his masterful delaying tactics, it's unlikely the army could have lived to fight another day. The revolution itself, very well, could have been defeated. Today, he is hailed as a hero in the former lands of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the modern-day countries of Poland, Belarus, and Lithuania. Perhaps his good friend Jefferson summarized his legacy the best in a letter written to General Gates. He is as pure a son of liberty as I have ever known. Wow. I hope you found this video both informative and exciting. Make sure to like, subscribe, and...
Wow. Wow. I've never heard of him. And now I was going to say his name, and Tadeusz. Wow, I just heard it, and I've already forgot it. Kosciusko? I don't even remember now. Good job, Kris. Good way to remember someone's memory by just forgetting how to say their name. Way to go. Maybe if there was a monument in front of you, maybe you'd push it over. I wouldn't. I can't believe I already forgot his name. How many times did we hear it? At least only one time. That was it. Didn't know anything about this guy. Kind of want to know more. I would think that he, for American Revolutionary War, we know about Marquis de Lafayette. I don't see why we don't. And we know about von Steuben. But I'm surprised we don't know more about him. This one was really good. You could have put those words, his name, in front of me, and I would have been like, he's making it up. Wow. Well, it's Saturday. I had to work today, and I have to record more videos, but I don't want to. I'm done. This is the last video I'm going to record for the day. I got to make them all up next week. So, like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Have a good day. Have a good night.